positive for Arsenal going into that is it looks like the injury situation is beginning to ease a bit. You touched on Martin Odegaard coming back. We'll start with him. I mean, as you mentioned, him putting in that performance after, was it a training session and a half they said he had, was incredible and hinted at what Arsenal have been missing. But how big is he Arsenal's most important player for you? How big is his absence been?
He's absolutely Arsenal's most important player. I started this season and people were saying to me, what do you think of Arsenal's window? I was like, it was okay, but it feels to me like they've left themselves one short. They let Smith Rowe go, they let Vieira go. It was basically Odegaard or bust in this squad, aside from a 17-year-old, very talented kid, but a 17-year-old kid in Ethan Nwaneri. And my big fear was if anything happened to Martin Odegaard, Arsenal would be in real trouble, because he is the heart, everything in an attacking sense, and not even attacking, defensive as well. He leads the press. He's the guy that triggers it. It's his work rate that gets everyone else going. And then obviously that's before you even talk about the creativity and the chance creation and the goals that he adds to this game. He is the most single important player in this team. And so to lose him the way they did so early on, yes, you can point the finger at Arteta, you can point the finger at Edu and say they've put themselves in this situation by letting other players who could fill in for him go and not bringing in a replacement. They took the risk and they've been punished for that. So it's been a massive loss. You can see it. I mean, just plunking a 70% fit Odegaard in that team at the weekend it was completely different. It was no surprise he set up the goal. He was the guy who created the big chance with his clever thinking. And you look at the other big moments Arsenal had in that game, Odegaard was central to them all. And so it's going to be a huge boost to get him back to full fitness, because it was very obvious he wasn't at full fitness. So it's massive. The key thing is now keeping him fit. Obviously, it looked like he was going to be joining up with Norway during the international break. The decision has now been taken after discussions with Norway and meeting up with Norway that that's not happening. He's going to be back in London. He's going to stay at Arsenal for the next 2 weeks, which obviously I think Arteta will probably be happy with. There was an argument that going over with Norway and maybe getting some minutes during the international break could be a good thing in terms of match sharpness, match fitness. But I think from certainly the majority of Arsenal fans' point of view, they will look at it and just think, I'd much rather him wrapped up in cotton wool for the next 2 weeks, get him fit at London Colney before the next batch of fixtures. So, I think in the long run, that's probably a good thing for Arsenal. And having him back's massive. It really, really is.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, whether you felt it was a good or bad thing that he wasn't going away now, because, as you say, there's the prospect of him getting some minutes under his belt, but then he looked like he hit the ground running against Chelsea, obviously, and maybe doesn't need that many minutes, and maybe would benefit more from a bit of time on the training ground, getting up to as close to match speed as you can. I think from Arsenal fans' point of view, the fact that his last injury came with Norway as well, is it's a big relief that he's not going away with them this time. It's quite important games for Norway as well, so he mustn't be fully fit, that if they're saying no, we can't take any risks with him. So I think he must not be fully fit, which puts his Chelsea performance into even more perspective if he's not fit enough for Norway. Do you think, to me it looked like the Chelsea game, it was pretty much a full strength 11 in terms of players on the pitch. I know not all of those players were 100% fit, but with Odegaard back in there, with Saka and Rice, there was question marks over their fitness. Obviously, they came off against Chelsea. But if they can keep that 11 on the pitch, is that then enough to really get those 8 wins out of 8, which you're talking about in the next run of fixtures, and get that title race back on track? Is Odegaard really that one missing piece of the jigsaw that will make that big of a difference?
I think he can. They showed it the second half of last season, the winning run that they went on, basically 16 out of 18 games. I think it was. The only draw was Man City, and then that costly defeat against Aston Villa. So they can do it. And we know this team can go on a run like that. And it is looking a much better, the injury situation. They're still missing Calafiori, and I think that is key. Timber's done a great job over on the left-hand side, but he is a right back. And Martinelli is often very isolated on the left-hand side because he's not got a fullback who is either, in Calafiori's case, I was going to say it, going on the overlap, but Calafiori is more sort of inverts and comes into the central area, but he's still a really key figure down that left-hand side. Timber does it every so often, but normally stays back because he's not that comfortable going on his left foot. So I think his return will be crucial for Arsenal as well, and that should be, fingers crossed, after the international break. But it is looking much, much better, the injury outlook. We'll wait and see on Saka and Rice. Obviously, they're not linking up with England. I don't think that was ever going to happen. I have to say, it was always a case of get through the Chelsea game, and they're not going to be going away with England. And you would think they'll be right after international break. And that team is looking a lot stronger, the strongest it has done all season, which is massive. And Mikel said it in a press conference after Chelsea. All he wants at the end of this break is to have a fully fit squad to be able to use for the first time this season, and then to really try and put a run together. And they can do it. They can do it. When you look at the fixtures, it's entirely possible. It's tough. It's the Premier League. No games are given. Look at what happened with Tottenham and Ipswich. The biggest home banker you're probably ever going to see, and it goes the other way. So you've still got to go and get the job done. But Arsenal are certainly looking in a much better position to go and do that now for the first time this season, really.
And would you put Arsenal's sort of dip in form over the last few weeks mainly down to those injuries? I know there's been other things earlier in the season, a few red cards, but mainly would you put that down to injuries and not having that full strength team? And does that maybe hint at a lack of depth in the squad that could maybe be a problem deeper into the season? Or are there other problems? We're going to touch on it in a little bit, but things like the defence and the attack not quite hitting the levels of last season, or is that all part of the injuries as well? Obviously,
I think it's all linked. To be honest, I still think this is a very good squad and a very good team. I mean, the depth is not too bad. It's just where there is a lack of depth is really the one position where they got hit, and that was Martin Odegaard. The defensive issues they've had this season, the players who've been out, and yet they've still managed to put out a really top quality defence almost every single week because of the depth that they have. Even in midfield, they're still pretty strong. Jorginho's barely got a look in this season, and yet he's had such a big influence on last season when he came into the side. It's just Martin Odegaard, and I hate going back to it, and I'm not using it as an excuse, but losing him, taking him out of this team, has completely changed the outlook of this Arsenal side. So I do think they've still got a very good squad. They could have got more. You always want more, don't you, in the transfer window? But I just think they took one risk in the window with Odegaard, and it came back to bite them. But I still think the squad's good enough now to go on the run that they need to go on once we come back after the international break.
Yeah, I think the stats sort of back up Odegaard's importance as well, don't they? Unbeaten with him in the team, and I think lost 3 when he was out injured as well. So those stats back it up.